Welcome to Spilling the Tea, where we deep dive into what drives high-performance culture. We'll break down the habits, mindsets, and leadership moves that actually make a difference. My name's Adam. Hello. I'm joined by our first guest today, Alice. Hello, Alice.
Hello, Adam.
I think we'll start with about you. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, where do I start? I suppose kind of from a professional point of view, I left college not knowing what I wanted to do with very little funds as well. So I had this kind of aspiration to travel a little bit with not a great amount of money in the bank. So I decided to take a punt and go and do some kind of work with the travel agents abroad. So I was in a rep position, which was great fun. And I actually did that for a whole lot longer than I anticipated. It ended up, what was going to be a couple of months, ended up being nearly 7 years in total. So I travelled around quite a bit. I then moved back to the UK, had my son, he's nearly 13, which is pretty scary, and moved into a completely different field. So I guess I was sort of faced with this challenge between wanting to do the best for Oscar on my own versus also wanting to try and kind of carve out a bit of a career for myself with very limited experience in different fields. So ended up in pharmacy, worked through kind of a varying degree of roles in pharmacy. And I guess the theme in everything that I've done has always been this real ambition to support the people that I work with, which led me to kind of invest in myself a little bit, really, from a learning point of view. So I did some learning in the evenings and then diversified my career quite significantly and moved into dentistry. So was in an operational role there in dentistry for Oasis Dental Care at the time, and then transferred across to Bupa. And actually the journey sort of from that point onwards has just been really rapid for me. There's been a huge amount of growth personally and professionally in terms of kind of where I've been able to explore things that I've had a little bit of interest in, but had that ability to be supported by a number of significant individuals, both within the organisation and externally as well. So it's one of the, I think anyone that you speak to that works in people always say they sort of fell into it. I sort of did, but I also had this kind of anticipation that I'd always do something that was connected to the people that work in an organisation. Personally, as I said, I've got a little boy. He's nearly 13, which is terrifying me. We just started secondary school, so that's scary. Live in Yateley in Hampshire. I've got a dog who I love walking. I've got a partner who's also got 2 children, sort of similar age to Oscar. So we're kind of in that process of blending our families a little bit at the moment as well. So we've got a lot going on at home and a lot of really exciting stuff happening at work as well.
Yeah, good stuff. And it sounds like, that sounds like quite the journey,
Yes.
actually. And before we get into more around kind of performance culture, just to ask you a question, which we're going to ask everyone in this series. Again, you're the first, so we'll see where this takes us. But if you were to choose, just to get a bit to know a little bit more about you, if you choose to choose 3 people, existing or non-existing people, to have dinner with, who would that be, do you think?
Like all at the same time?
All at the same time, one dinner party.
Okay, Louis Theroux.
Yeah, great choice.
110%.
Great
He's
choice.
Possibly my favourite person to watch and listen to.
Yeah.
My granny. We lost my
Nice.
granny. I was about 18, 19 at the time, and she was just a real force to be reckoned with. So I'd love to spend some more time with her. And I'm really into music as well. Quite a diverse mix of music, but maybe someone like Stevie Wonder, I think, could be quite an interesting eclectic mix of people around
nice
dinner
if there's
table.
a piano there as well,
Yeah,
so
a
we
little
can
bit
get
of
the
music.
tunes going.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely.
I love that. I've roped you in. We've known each other a little bit over the last few years and worked together relatively closely. When I asked you to do a series like this, how did it make you feel to do something around like high performance culture and things?
We'll probably come on to it later, but doubt has always been a bit of a theme for me. So I think when you first asked, I thought you were asking me to ask if I knew somebody that would want to kind of take part in this series. Felt really privileged, but also very excited to hear that we're focusing on what it means to have a high performance culture in an organisation. It's something that I feel really, really passionate about for a number of different reasons. But it's just wonderful to understand that we're really driving this in a way that gives people an opportunity to showcase what that means to them and perhaps some of their experience that they've had in that space.
So our purpose is helping people live longer, healthier, happier lives and making a better world. What does Bupa's purpose mean to you?
I think it's, speaking really honestly, probably the first time I've worked in an organisation where there's a purpose that feels like something that I can connect to personally, for a number of different reasons, but it feels very it's clear, but it's also very impactful. And I think for me that is significantly important. I think it's broad enough as well that everybody can start to understand what their job means and the work that they do on a daily basis, how that impacts the wider purpose. I think the kind of the development of that towards making a better planet as well is really driving and shifting our approach to a lot of the actions that we take. So I think it's a purpose that is, everybody here knows it, understands it, and I think on the whole majority of people feel really connected to.
Great answer. Next question. What are your, in a high performance culture and the teams that you lead and your stakeholder management, and the way you work in general, what do you think are your 3 non-negotiables?
They probably blur a little bit with my sort of personal values, I think. So for me, integrity is really, really important. I think this stretches beyond kind of what that might look like on a surface level for the role that I do, but also the fulfillment that I get out of the work that I do. I'm extremely passionate about being able to be very open and honest and work in a world where everybody has got that kind of same I suppose, approach to being very, integral in what they're doing. So I think that's probably the first one. Trust is highly important to me. I think you have to be surrounded by people that you can trust, and trust in the sense that you support each other and you can trust each other in decision making. I think that's highly important. And probably something that I've only really come across in the last couple of years, but continuous improvement is highly important to me. It's something that probably I've taken for granted for a number of years, but something that I've certainly focused on more recently. And I think, getting to a point where that is something that I want to do, but also encourage other people to do is really important to me.
Nice. I like it. And that comes, like, again, working with you, I think that really comes through actually. So that's nice that you say it's like, oh yeah, actually that is how Alice operates. That's really nice. How do you manage those kind of negative self-talk and voice inside your head that kind of, where you doubt yourself, or how do you kind of deal with that?
Everyone gets this, right? So I think I can't imagine having this conversation with anyone and they're like, oh yeah, it just doesn't really happen for me. I think this is something that people struggle with at different phases in their career or in their personal life. For me, I think I've always struggled with it, more professionally probably than personally. I think I kind of seem to be able to overcome my personal challenges quite easily. It's something that I've kind of built up a bit of a resilience around. Professionally, I think I have, again, certainly over the last couple of years, starting to focus on this a little bit more, and perhaps that's with the growth in my career journey. It's led me to be in scenarios where perhaps you get that kind of imposter syndrome feeling. You're in these, this is a great example. You're invited to do things, you're invited into conversations where you're really questioning why, and having trust and faith that you have built, whether it's a brand piece or whether it's those kind of confidence in your skills and your opinions, that you're there for a reason. So I think that's something that I have worked on a lot recently. I've done a lot of kind of self-learning. I've got a mentor, which has been a massive support to me, particularly in this space. I think having confidence in yourself it sounds a bit cliche, doesn't it? But you're here for a reason. Everybody is here for a different reason. We're not all expected to look and feel and act in the same way. And I think having trust that your gut is telling you to do things in a particular way is really, really important, particularly when you're battling those negative thoughts. And I've really tried to adopt just a real like glass half full for the majority of things. It's not always possible, but I really do try and see the best in situations.
So that's really interesting because you mentioned about a mentor there, which I assume that everyone in the business in Bupa has access to if they want it. What was kind of the driving force behind deciding to get a mentor and kind of signing up to that?
I think probably that realization that I was probably creating a bit of a block for myself in terms of almost sort of envisaging challenges that perhaps weren't even there, and it became really apparent that that was a confidence piece for me. So I had an opportunity to speak to my leader about that, and actually, you know, we had a really open conversation about who might be the right person to support me in unblocking some of what I was sort of contending with. But you're right, everybody has got access to mentors. There's a wonderful scheme internally that is called Bupa Match that you can sign up to. But equally, I think people do tend to get to points in their career, and again, kind of at different stages and phases throughout what they're perhaps experiencing, and feel like they just need a bit of guidance or a different set of ears to work with. So it's a great tool to use.
So you and please say if I'm prying too
Yeah.
much. You don't have to answer any of these because I'm sure some of these are going to be personal. But you mentioned that you just experienced a few blockers there that you maybe didn't know were there. Do you want to share them? Or?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So kind of I suppose the role that I have in the business, I'm very privileged that the role has grown as the business has grown. So, you know, the part of the business that I work in has almost tripled or nearly tripled and a bit in size in about 3 years, which is immense. And I think, you know, we knuckled down and we got stuck into it, and we were in a position where we were working in an unsustainable way, but in an effective way for quite a long period of time. And I think as I was coming out of that, I started to question the role that I'd sort of landed in really as a result of that. And I think for me, that challenge around being in different forums than I had previously been in and being listened to and expected to have an opinion on things was something that I really grappled with. And I think I wanted to be able to contribute in an effective way, but I didn't feel quite as though I had the capability to do that. And I think actually, you know, what's come out through some of the learning and the conversations, both with mentors and peers as well, is that confidence piece for me. So, you know, learning that it's okay to sit in a room and take notes and, you know, contribute to things as and when. And sometimes you might write something down as somebody's talking, thinking that you've got something to add. But actually, you know, as the conversation continues, perhaps that's not the case. So I think it's just learning to feel as though you're contributing and you have an impact in a world where perhaps you don't understand everything that's being discussed. That was the real challenge for me.
And that's okay, right?
And it's
because
fine.
You can't always know the answer.
No, and learning is, you know, those environments serve as a real, like, they are great learning nests as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, getting to a point where you're comfortable to ask questions and be really curious where you don't know the answer to something, I think that's brave to do that, you know, to sit in a room of people that are very passionate and clearly very well educated in their fields and go, sorry, could you explain that to me, because I don't quite understand it, is hard to do. But the more you do it, the more you learn and the more confidence that you end up building as a result of that.
And that confidence sounds like that's once you've felt like you've had is it fair to say a bit more belief in yourself?
Yeah,
maybe?
Definitely.
And you think a mentor's kind of really help with that.
100%.
Just kind of maybe break it down and dissect it a little bit and figure out where
and to learn, like, this is, and again, you know, we live in a world, don't we, where you can self-serve a lot of this information, which is wonderful. But sometimes you just need a conversation with someone to go, and somebody that you respect perhaps, or has got a career that you're interested in following. You could be, you know, for any reason that you're working with that mentor, but ultimately it is to hear that somebody that you know, I suppose you trust or perhaps admire has also struggled with those things. You go, oh, actually, God, yeah, it's not just me. This is somebody of that kind of stature or whatever it might be has also grappled with similar things, and for them to share ideas and suggestions and not necessarily solve what it is you're looking for, but just to help guide you a little bit through some ideas around what you can do to support yourself.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. We're in a very busy business that's
Yeah.
constantly moving forward. And sometimes there's quite high pressure decisions that you have to make. How do you make them decisions under pressure?
I think under pressure, and sometimes at, in really tight timescales as well. Something that we've probably experienced a lot, I would say, like you said, over the last couple of years. I think for me, this is where you really kind of lean on trusting your instinct, use your gut. Of course, you need to surround yourself with the experts that you have access to, that are going to provide you with that kind of rational information that you need to be able to digest quite quickly and make generally quite swift decisions on. I think when we're working in this high pressured environment, getting comfortable with making errors is also something that you have to get used to quite quickly, but also learning from them as quickly as you are kind of operating is really, really, really important. I think this is where that kind of integrity piece comes in that I mentioned earlier on. I think, if you're working in a world where everybody that is making those decisions, albeit perhaps swift, is doing it because they feel like it's the right thing. Generally speaking, it probably is the right thing. And of course, you're going to come across, situations where things don't pan out. But actually, if the intent has been positive and you've had that kind of similar direction of travel as a group in terms of what you're working on, I think that's really key. I think communication in these environments is absolutely the number one priority. You have to be able to communicate with the people that you're working on in a way that works for everybody. And that can take some time to build, getting to a point where you've got a team around you that understands what that communication looks and feels like, and you've had an opportunity to explore that ahead of being in a situation where you need to make these kind of swift decisions in that high pressured environment is really important.
Yeah, brilliant. Sometimes things can go wrong, even when you make decisions, things can go wrong, right? And sometimes working life, especially when you're balancing a family life as well, it can take its toll. How do you kind of really keep yourself like motivated through kind of those harder times and stay really positive and motivated to do what you do?
I think this is balance, right? So you have to have the opportunity to understand what it is that really gives you energy. And, for different people, this looks like very different things. I'd love to be sitting here saying I go for a run every evening after work, or and I probably don't have those types of habits that you might get from other conversations. The things for me that are really, really important is to pause and stop at the end of the day and really, switch off from everything that's been happening. And that's something that's taken a lot of time for me to get comfortable with doing, particularly working at home predominantly. It's very easy to dip in and out and, getting to a point where I can comfortably close the door on the laptop and be really present in my personal life has been something that I've worked quite hard on. I think once you understand what it is that gives you energy, actually maintaining kind of your commitment to ensuring that you can continue doing those things is absolutely the key to being able to cope with the high pressured environments that we're going to find ourselves in from a work perspective. And you're going to come across different scenarios where you do have to let your non-negotiables slip a little bit, but making sure that you're regularly checking in with yourself and understanding, how do I kind of get back on track here, and really understand what it is that I need at that point in time. I'm quite lucky. I'm probably the only person in the world that says this at the moment, but quite lucky that I've got a son that is at school, because actually I tend to follow the school holidays and take some time off at those intervals. And I think that's that's a good reminder for me to pause and break. I think that would be my biggest piece of advice to people, is just to make sure that you get, we're entitled to breaks. Make sure you get in those breaks in, whether it's even something as little as a lunch break. It's just so important to be able to maintain your level of consistency in what you're delivering.
In that time, yeah, absolutely. And I think Bupa are really good enablers for that, right? Like about energy and making sure you're doing what works for you to get the most out of you, and you can, enable you to be at your best. So this next question's around leadership and team dynamics. How do you foster open communication and build trust within that team?
I think it's about making people feel safe. I think if people feel safe to contribute, building relationships becomes a much easier thing to do. It is something that I've probably taken for granted in terms of a skill of mine, is it, that ability to connect with people. And actually, starting to think about like the how behind that is a really interesting process to go through. I think for me, it's investing time in understanding what makes people tick is probably the best time you'll ever spend. Once you've got that connection, that understanding of an individual or of a team in terms of kind of connection and what drives them and what's really important to them, you can, as a leader anyway, you can certainly enable them to get what they want from the role that they're doing as well. And when we feel connected to a position that we're in or the work that we're doing, and it feels really meaningful, your performance is going to automatically elevate. If people feel engaged in the work and the purpose and whatever it is that they're contributing to, they will undoubtedly be performing at a much higher level as a result of that engagement. And I think relationship building, that trust, that communication is absolutely the foundations of getting to a point where you've got an environment as a team where you can openly communicate, share ideas, learn from each other as well. I think it's we're in an interesting time at the moment. We're going through a period of growth, which is very exciting, and having an opportunity to recruit into a team has been a really enjoyable task, and probably something that I haven't had the opportunity to do for a little while. And this time doing it with the intent of creating a work environment that feels very diverse. So purposefully looking for individuals that are going to bring a different attitude or a different set of skills or a different kind of behaviour set has been a really important element to building that team for me. And I think that is, it keeps it fresh, it keeps it exciting, but it does also present those challenges in terms of making sure that you can take everybody's needs into account. I think communication, and we've talked about it quite a bit anyway, but regular communication is key, and that will look really different for different people. It might be a half-hour check-in each week, it might be a full kind of team meeting. That learning the needs of your team from a comms point of view is really, really important.
Yeah, that's really fascinating around communication and things. I think in Bupa, that's something we really work on.
Yeah.
And where our team are part of internal comms, and you can see that firsthand how important it is to get it right absolutely every time. And I think they do it really well here. So that's really interesting. So kind of coming on to a final question,
Yeah.
almost depending.
Okay.
How do you balance your personal life with your professional aspirations?
Probably not very well. No, I think it again. Different times this seems to be better than others, and I think kind of what I was mentioning before around having that ability to really stop is key. But also, actually, I love the work that I do, so of course it goes home with me a bit, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it's really important to be able to share how you felt about things and things that have happened that might be interesting. So I do benefit from a very supportive network personally, which certainly enables me to spend the time that I do doing the work that we do here. I think that commitment and the ambition that I have to do a good job here. Actually, I'm really proud to be able to showcase that to my family, and particularly my son, who, 12, 13, very impressionable age. I think it's really key that he sees that it's okay to get excited about work, and it's a good thing to feel the way that I do about the work that I have the privilege to do. I think, as mentioned previously, balance, being able to sort of separate what I'm doing is key. But that ability to kind of demonstrate passion and real enjoyment of what I'm doing has actually been really great to be able to show that to Oscar. I think lockdown was a bit of a turning point from my perspective anyway. That's where things definitely collided personally and professionally. And the whole world was navigating new ways of working. And I think for me, it made me appreciate the ability to kind of dip in between the two in a quite a fluid way. So I think, the key thing for me is just retaining as much balance as I possibly can. But also, having that network that is understanding and supportive, and interested in what I'm doing.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Alice, for
You're welcome.
giving so much information and sharing so much. I'm going to finish on this question.
Yeah.
If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Ooh, do you know, I've asked this to so many people before, but never really thought about what I would give to myself. I think it would be to not follow the crowd. I think that is probably something that I struggled with as certainly as a teenager anyway. I think not following the crowd is not only just okay, I think it should be championed.
A lovely way to finish. Thank you, Alice.
You're welcome. Thank you.